The Art and Industry of Business and Living podcast, discussing conscious choices around business, money, life and living, and creating a greater future for you and the planet. Hi everybody, welcome to The Art and Industry of Business and Living. You're with Simone, Milasas, your host, and I have three people joining me today, which pleases me very much. I absolutely adore these people. So we have Mr. and Mrs. Bowman, Steven and Chutisa Bowman, who have been on here quite a few times. I've known them for, quite some time actually. Chutisa came along to Access Consciousness, the first class that I ever went to, which was called Out of the Box in Sydney. It was probably about 15 years ago. So I have known them for a long time. And Steven and Chutisa are global business advisors. They're authors and speakers who have spent the past 30 plus years, they must have started when they were like 5, working with many top society-changing companies and entrepreneurs of our time. They're recognized worldwide as pragmatic futurists and thought leaders on strategic awareness, conscious leadership, prosperity consciousness, business transformation in a period of economic uncertainty, and benevolent capitalism. So just in case you want to check them out right now while you're listening to the podcast, you can go to www.the2bowmans.com, which is the number 2. So these guys have been my financial advisors for, it took us a while to start asking them. And I'd say probably, I think the last 6-7 years, they've been mine and Brendon's financial advisors. Because they live in Australia, it really, really helped us setting up our businesses, trusts, companies, etc. And I remember this day in India where we were asking, as one does when you're in India, Brendon and myself were asking Steve and Chutisa for help with different things. And we woke up the next morning at breakfast and Chutisa has this whole diagram and she's drawn out where all the trusts that they have and the companies that they have and what they run through them. Like if it's real estate or if it's trading accounts, etc., and how it all works. So we had like our little, couldn't have a whiteboard, but we had a piece of paper and she drew it all out for us. And from that moment, I love it when someone shows me something practical like that. And we started to create our financial reality in a really, really different way. So Steven, Chutisa, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. I know you live in Melbourne, Victoria, but you are in London at the moment, I hear.
We are indeed. And thanks very much for having us on here, Simone.
So, and then now let me introduce David Kubes, who is, I think I've known him for, it feels like forever, but a few years now, and he's one of the most creative people I've ever come across. I love the way I hear David quite often call himself as just the lawyer, and he's an amazing lawyer, and he is from Vienna, Austria. He graduated from high school in 1994, and he started working for Austrian Airlines as a part-time employee in order to finance his studies. His passion for aviation grew every year, resulting in his PhD in aviation law 5 years later. And if you talk to David, he also does some classes called The Art of Travel. And he is amazing at what he knows about travel. So I'm not sure if they're still available now, if some coming up, but we'll find out from David. And following those years, he dedicated himself to aircraft financing and aviation projects for international clients. So in 2009, Dr. Kubes became an international mediator and focused on alternative dispute resolution for global companies and worldwide organizations. Today, his law firm has 4 partners and runs 12 international projects in 5 countries. His law firm was rewarded Best Aviation Law Firm in Austria in 2015 and 2017. That's awesome. And David helps us with our international law for the 3 companies of Access Consciousness. Plus, he also assists us in some investment properties that we have. You can check it out on projectpossibilities.com, which actually all of us are involved in. There's one in El Lugar in Costa Rica. It's called El Lugar. It's a big property that we're building a resort on. And the second one is a fabulous, fabulous castle in Italy that we are renovating and making it come back to life so that we can show people the elegance of what it's like to visit a castle, be in a castle, and have that sort of, I guess the elegance of living the way that people used to. We sort of take that, I think people took it for granted and they don't do that anymore. But this castle is absolutely amazing. It's called Castle Borgoni, and you can see both of those places on projectpossibilities.com. So, David, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Good morning, and thank you for having me here as your guest today.
So the topic that we've got here is called In Charge and Leading. Love it. And I know these three people and I know myself. That is such a good topic for the four of us, in charge and leading. So let's start with the Bowmans. And let me start with the question, what is it about being in charge that leads to, say, micromanaging? Because one of the things I see a lot of people do is when they're in charge, they think it's about micromanaging. And I see so many people destroy their business because they do micromanage staff and they micromanage the whole entire business, the project, etc. Rather than how do you both see what it is about being in charge that leads to micromanaging and leads to something different?
Well, it's interesting when you look at the energy behind being in charge. It has the energy of having to be right and knowing exactly what to do, and nothing that doesn't meet what you'd already decided must be done is actually right. So when someone functions from the being in charge way of being, then they are the ones who are the source for everything, and they will be happy with nothing unless they do it, which by its very nature is the definition of micromanagement.
And the thing is, in most businesses in this reality, leaders seem to see themselves as being in charge instead of being a true leader.
So what is a true leader?
The true leader is someone who's always being in the question, someone who's functioned from following the energy instead of trying to control everything to happen. When you are being in charge, you tend to do everything from control, force, and effort. When you are in charge, you tend to come from fixed point of view, from expectation, projection, and judgment, and from the expected outcome. But when you are when you are being a leader, you constantly being the question, willing to change, willing to see different possibilities instead of trying to achieve the certain expectation and certain outcome.
A true leader really knows what needs to be done, which includes doing nothing. And in fact, one of the greatest gifts any leader has is to know when to sit back and just either be quiet or watch things as they unfold rather than trying to take charge. So what we find with a lot of people is that they think they've got to take charge because everyone's expecting them to take charge, which is a really interesting way of looking at the world, because then you have to be taking charge in everything, and it doesn't allow for that innovation. It doesn't allow for the possibilities to show up that could actually help create something even greater than what they've got at the moment. Typically, being in charge means that you are trying to deal with an issue then and there the way you've already decided it should be. And in my view, probably the only time that really works is when a real crisis has occurred and someone needs to actually step in because no one else is going to do anything because they're all too scared.
So if you lead from being in charge, you always have the right and wrong, good and bad ways of doing.
Yeah, and the way you guys are talking about it too, I see it's sort of like, when a horse is in a horse race and they have their blinkers on, someone in charge has sort of got those blinkers on. They can only see a certain amount. They don't have the awareness of everything that is occurring. And the way you talk about being a true leader is actually having the awareness of everything. And you know what, even when you're talking about it, and I hope you guys out there listening get this, being a true leader is something that is far easier than being in charge. And it's like the amount of energy that you use to be in charge rather than actually just leading. Like Steve said, it's like sometimes it's about actually doing nothing but being aware of everything. It's like sitting back and seeing how things unfold. And what I noticed with that too, it's the willingness to allow people to have their point of view. You're employing people or you're working with people, and it's allowing them to have their awareness, because every single person has a different awareness. I mean, the entire company, it's like, you see people who do the in charge, and it's like when they're sort of focused and it's like, it has to be my way. Like you said, Chutisa, it has to be right, has to be the right way, has to be a fixed point of view rather than the energy of allowing anything to show up, which means things showing up that you never thought would show up before. So, David, tell me about, because you've got a law firm and you've got 4 partners and you run in 12 international projects in 5 countries. I feel like you do way more than that. You're always everywhere, same as the Bowmans. So tell me about what it is for you to be a leader in the law firm and sort of some tools or different ways that you can see, that it works, that it creates that energy that you're after.
Well, being in charge and leading in an international law firm is one of the most challenging things I experienced, because the entire law system is based on what is right and what is wrong, and how do we come to a conclusion. It all ends up to the question, whose fault is it? And this is the exact definition of being in charge, looking for the person whose fault it was and looking for why has it failed and why is it not working. And this is actually my definition of being in charge. Being in charge is focusing on things, why could it not work, rather than opening your horizon and look at, okay, what are other possibilities? What else can we do here? What else should show up? What else can show up? For me, the difference in leading a project or being in charge of a project is actually the willingness to also fail and make mistakes. In this reality, failing and making mistakes is what you need to avoid. So if someone is in charge, they only avoid to make mistakes. And even talking about this energy, it kind of distracts, and it's not an expanding energy. My definition of making a mistake is easy. There is actually no mistake other than not choosing and not changing things that don't work. So if you lead an international project and everybody expects you to be right, to be wrong, or to make the right decisions so that nothing can go wrong, you have to be willing to make mistakes, knowing that making a mistake is actually only possible if you don't change things that have to be changed. So you have to be willing to be flexible. And this is what, for me, is the difference in being in charge and leading. Leading means take the lead, go on, be willing to be judged for decisions you made that might have not turned out as smart as you thought they were at the beginning, but change them as it shows up and as a change is required. This is actually the most important thing, or the most important element of leading a project. You have to change things that don't work, and then you cannot fail, because then your primary target is to get the project done, rather than looking how can I avoid mistakes and whose fault was it that something went wrong.
Well, it's pretty funny, David, because you're a lawyer.
Yes, I know.
Aren't you supposed to look at, whose fault is it, who did something wrong?
Well, the entire law business is based on whose fault is it, and this is why I actually decided to become to develop projects and do international projects rather than going to court. It's a waste of energy looking for whose fault is it. It's way more fun to look, okay, so what now? And this is the energy of the leader. What now?
You'd be great in court, though, David. I would love to see you litigate one day.
It wouldn't be fun for me.
But anyway, and it's like, so I get this is brilliant information. And I get what you're talking about too. It's like those places of, someone who's focused and in charge is always looking for the solutions to the problems, which means you have to create problems rather than actually knowing that there's possibilities available. So I get that a true leader is looking at the places of, what possibilities are available today that we have not yet asked for, which is a great question and one of my favorite questions that you can use. So what I would like to ask all three of you too is, if you can give the listeners some sort of pragmatic tools of what you use to become this, or, did you just wake up and become this on day one? And it's like, I like the way, David, you were talking about, you looked at the law and went, okay, this part is not fun for me, but this part, like doing these, international projects would be fun. So you looked at the places that you could create a change, create a difference in the world, and actually have possibilities by still working within law. So you looked at for what was going to work for you.
Yes, exactly. But to be honest, the way I started this, I was always functioning from that, and I always knew, okay, there is not a possibility. So I just started doing it, being it. And the first time when I did it, I was still a trainee lawyer in a law firm, junior trainee even. And I started to lead a project. And of course, the other senior partners didn't like it. The clients loved it. So they wanted a law firm to put me on all the important projects. So what happened? They kicked me out because they didn't want to lose the clients, and they were kind of jealous that the junior is getting the big projects. So they kicked me out, and I didn't go into, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that. I went like, okay, what now? So I opened I got my own little license and opened my first law firm in the living room of my student's apartment. I just said, okay, if that doesn't work for me, I just couldn't continue working against what I knew. And this is how I started. And this is how I found out that you cannot make mistakes, because it took my clients exactly 3 days to find me, and I got my own contract. So I didn't lose a job. I didn't lose anything. I didn't make a mistake. I did what worked for me. And 3 days later, I had my first international client who found out that I was not working there anymore. And they found me on the internet and contacted me. And and the rest of the story is here. One led to the other. And I wasn't willing to lose the job back then, because I was really frustrated these 3 days. But I learned that if you follow your knowing and if you do what's fun for you, things always show up in a greater way. You just can't figure it out. You just can't know it ahead. This is actually learning by doing. Just be a little patient and things will show up.
And have fun. I mean, I remember the first time I heard Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness, say, what if the purpose in life was to have fun? And I was like, seriously? You're allowed to? That's okay? So even, with your career, it's like every choice you make, it's like have fun. And it's like it allows you to actually have more possibilities available. So thank you, David. So Chutisa and Steve, tell us more about how or some tools that you come up with to sort of, get you where you are, et cetera, or what you can give the listeners, and how did you figure this out?
It's very interesting listening to what David was talking about, that the lawyer has a certain perception about their role. And I sense that that's what most people in the world misapply leadership as being in charge, because they think that when you are a leader, you are responsible, accountable, therefore you have to be in charge. And quite often from that space, they tend to become anti-conscious leader instead of conscious leader. If they totally embody and be being in charge, where they're trying to look for who to blame, looking for right or wrong, good or bad, the leadership position become pointing finger, become anti-conscious. So what would it be like if the leadership starting to look from the space of just leading, just being in the question, just choosing to be aware of what's going on out there and what can they be and do to change all of that. So one tool that I live and I invite everyone to live by is to become present with what is and be aware of what can and can't be. So if you put yourself in the space of being present with what is, then you have to constantly be in the question about what is happening here, what's going on around here, what can I be and do different to create different possibilities here. Therefore, you don't have a fixed expectation, projection, and judgment about what things supposed to be. You're just being in the question and follow the energies.
And one of our businesses we've got is a global advisory businesses that we have with boards and CEOs around the world. And that's what people have said makes us different. to just about anyone else I've ever come across, because it's being aware of what is, of what can be and what can't be, and having no point of view about any of that, but also unlocking the wisdom of others so that they can actually look to see from their own point of view what can, what could, and what can't. So, and people see this as leading. Even though you are not doing leadership, you are actually being the leader by being in that state of constant question, but also being aware of what's not going to work as well too.
It's about pragmatic choice, knowing what can and can't be, to actually see what is truly happening without trying to project your conclusion and expectation and assumption around it. Then you can make a true pragmatic choice with that.
I love that. Thank you, guys. And one of the things I would like to add to that too is, I mean, when you spoke to Chutisa about, like, you know, being the anti-conscious leader, you know, instead of the conscious leader, and if you're listening to this and you're wondering or questioning, which I hope you're questioning, it's like how you're being in your life and in the workplace, etc. One of the tools that I like to use too is ask, am I trying to prove something or create something? Because if you're trying to prove something, you're more so functioning from an agenda. And an agenda has all these sort of fixed points of view, these limitations, these judgments, conclusions. Whereas if you're making something a priority, like in reference to, you know, the projects that David is working on, say with El Lugar and the castle, etc., if you're making them a priority, then you can function from the creation and possibilities. So use that tool of asking, am I trying to prove something? And you'll know, I mean, practice that tool at home. It's like, you know, when you're talking to a family member, etc., or the wife or the husband or the child or something, are you trying to prove something? And if you are trying to prove something, it's not creating a greater possibility, which functioning as a leader from consciousness is creating a greater possibility. And the anti-conscious is more like what we've been talking about, that sort of, you know, in charge. And it's like more sort of that focused energy, micromanaging. It doesn't create something greater. So have a look at what you would like to create in your life. And would you like to create something greater? It's like, use these tools, you know, use the questions, ask some questions. So Steve, Chutisa, David, I know you're doing a class in Australia very soon.
It's on December 10th. The class is on December 10th in the evening. Chutisa, do you have our inspiring class title present? Because I don't remember it at the moment.
Yes, David and Simone. The class that we're going to do on the September 10th time, it's just a taster. It's an introduction. David and the two Bowmans are looking forward to taking the world by storm. Is that the word you would say?
I love that.
It would be a global expansion of this title. The title is Extrapolation of Possibilities with Business and Capitalism. That title was given to us by Mr. Gary Douglas when I was talking to him about what else is possible that we could do with benevolent capitalism in terms of how can we introduce more concept of what else is possible in terms of leading from a space of benevolent. And he said that David and us are the three who have experience and credential and the knowledge and what else?
Good looks, I think you mentioned.
Good looks, of course, yes. I totally agree. I would do, like, you three in a class, brilliant. So it's like, I'm definitely going to be there. And I know that not everyone listening to this podcast is actually in Australia. So is there a way that they could actually purchase that class if they desired to?
Yes, the class will be an audio live class. So you can buy the class on the Access Consciousness website, and then you can listen to the audios live, or you can then listen to the recordings.
Okay, so just to explain that too, audio live means that as the class is on live, you can actually ring in. We have like an instant teleseminar line. You ring into that, or you go on by webcast. So you can actually put your hand up and ask questions live in class of Chutisa and Steve and David. So it is in the evening in Australia. So if you go to accessconsciousness.com, and if you check out, I'd say David Kubes, which is Kubes, and you'll find the class. It's in Noosa, Australia, and come visit us in Noosa, Australia on the 10th of December. So, and you can also find the Bowmans on the2bowmans.com. I wanted to sort of swing before we leave here today, swing back to what we were talking about, like the in charge and leading. And for the listeners out there, can you guys give a couple of different examples of if someone is micromanaging, how do they get out of micromanaging? Where do they start? Like, what's that first place? Can they change?
Great question, that one, because when you look at micromanaging, one of the things I found the easiest to explain this to people so they can see where it's happening is when someone delves way too deep into operational details with no strategic oversight about why they're doing it. They're doing it just because they're doing it. The strategic oversight is, well, what's the bigger picture here? I'm willing to dive into and micromanage, but there's a reason behind that that's got a much wider strategic intent behind it. And once I've got what I need, then I'll pull myself out of the micromanaging. Most people see micromanagement as I need to get in there and fix things because no one else is going to do it as good as I will. Often you'll find it's the energy behind that. So if you find yourself getting into the, oh my goodness, I've got to fix this, I've got to get in there and I've got to do all this, and why can't anyone do it like I do it, and no one's as busy as me, and I've still got it. That's the energy of micromanaging.
And it's the energy of proving, not creating.
So one of the things you can ask, and one of the great tools is, am I doing this to prove? Am I doing this to create? If you get the energy, I'm doing it to prove that I can, or I'm doing it to prove someone else is wrong, then just choose differently. What else needs to change here? What else needs to occur? What needs to go on that will create something even greater here?
Micromanaging sometimes is just not trusting that those people working with us able to do the job that they should be doing. If that's the case, should we be asking, are these the right people? If we can't trust them, what else is possible?
And I have to confess that I've been there, done this. Many years ago, one of the first classes I ever went to with Gary Douglas was a business class. It was a 2-day business class. I was huge amounts in debt. I had my own business and it was in San Francisco. And I decided to fly to San Francisco and go to this class. And I'm sitting in the front row. I was so eager because this man, Gary Douglas, was talking about everything that I knew was possible, but no one else was talking about. And one of the first things he was talking about is who you hire. And I realized that I had the point of view, my confession, that no one could do the business as well as me. And I sat in the front row and went, shit, all I'm doing is hiring people who can't do the business as well as me. I was making sure that I had to micromanage. I was making sure that I had to be in charge and not lead. So the first thing I did was I started asking questions, and I asked, what would it take for staff to show up who were better than me? So it's a great question, and not better based on judgment, better based on someone was better at accounts than me, someone was better at sales than me, someone was better at organization. So then the whole idea was that if I started to become useless, the business would actually expand. Because if I've got people working in all these different areas and I'm not micromanaging them because I've, employed people who literally are not capable, that's what I was doing. I was employing people who weren't capable so I could prove that I was the important one. So been there, done that. So guess what? You can change it. You can become more of a leader. So that's a great tool out there for any of you listening. Ask, what would it take for me to find staff who are better than me?
Another great tool that I'm using, or that I avoided a long time, be willing to ask for help. In this reality, being a leader or being in a high position is always twisted with a thought like, okay, you can't fail, you have to know everything, and asking for help is considered as a weakness. And this is what you need to get over. Asking for help is a greatness, and if you're a true leader, you ask for help when you know that you need help. You cannot know and do everything on your own. You can be aware of everything, but to execute everything you're aware of, you need help, and it's not a failure to ask for help. And you can start with little things. I had a big judgment about myself because when I'm writing emails and even drafting contracts, I'm not good at typewriting, so I make a lot of typos. I just asked an intern to proofread my stuff because I'm not good at typing, which is not a failure. It's a smart idea to have someone to proofread your contracts before you send them out. So I started to ask for help and to get help in. And the question was, how can you start to get out of micromanaging? Well, start with little small things and start to ask for help. That's not a failure. It's actually a strongness.
And for me, I've chose to play with it in a different way in business. Like what I have been doing is I have educated myself with everything that needs to be done to create a business. So for example, if we need to do social media, if we need to do the graphics, if we need to do everything, I make sure that I learn how to do every single thing to the best possible capacity that I can be and do. So I do that. And with all our staff, before I give them any project to do with anything, I will do one to show them, like if I want to do the graphics of any form, I will do a few to show them, I can do it and I know how to do it. And I give them the project because they know that I know what it is and what it takes to create all of that. And our staff said, oh my goodness, Chutisa, if you keep doing this, you make me look bad. So when they say that, they will keep on trying to do it better to show me that they can do as well. So this is a form of manipulation. But because
it is a form of manipulation. I love it.
I'm an obsessive compulsive learner and creator. So before I even get any one of my staff to do anything, I tend to trying to work out what to do and how to do it and what would it take to do it well. Because I hear people keep on saying, I talked to a few people and they said, oh, I hire all these people to do things for me and they don't do it, they can't do it. And then I asked them, so what is it that you think that doing well is? What is it that you think that create a good graphic, a good product is? And they don't know, but they know that they don't like what they don't like, but they don't know what they like and how to do it. So I learned from that. And I thought, whatever it is that I want to ask anyone to do, I made a point of learning myself to do it. So, Steve and I, if we get rid of all the staff, we can actually create a multi-million-dollar business, just the two of us. Because I know I can do anything and everything that will require for the business to be successful. And it's not from the point that I'm trying to micromanage people, but from the point that let people know that, you know what, I can do that as well. So they have to be able to do it better than me. And I'm not micromanaging them at all. I just show it to them. This is need to be done and do it.
So then do you let them sort of choose to do it the way they would do it?
Absolutely. Like I used to think that I'm the best person to do the editing of audio, video, everything that I use because I did it for about the first 10 years of our business together. I was the one who did all the video and audio products for the conscious governance. So I didn't give the project away to anyone. And now we have our full-time staff that used to be our intern. And he even doing better than me now because he's constantly trying to outcreate me all the time, knowing that any moment I can take the job and do it myself. So I think that's a key manipulation that you could do with your staff, for all your staff to know that you can do equally as well if you choose, but you're not choosing it. You let them do it themselves and allow them to have, the leeway of how they do it. And you'll be surprised how well they can do it and how well they can do it even better than you can. But the key point here is to find the staff who are willing to be that.
But I also like what you're talking about, Chutisa, because I sort of see by you being able to do everything that you're asking them to do, it's sort of like you're setting this bar, you're setting the demand for something great to show up, for everybody to have, be their capacities and have their capacities and show their capacities to the fullest and then even more. So I love that. It's like a totally empowerment of the people that you work with.
Simone, and the important things I like to say is, once you do that and once you give the project to people, it is so important not to micromanage them. It is important to not tell them how to do it, what to do, and what you expect from them. I have to let them choose and create and generate everything. And surprisingly, by not micromanaging them, they end up, create something beyond I could ever imagine.
Thank you, Chutisa. Steve, do you have anything to add to that? We're nearly at the end of our show.
Yeah, I suppose the thing with staff and us getting to know how to do everything is the key thing here is to get over your point of view that you don't know how to do something. Because if you've got the point of view that you don't know how to do something, then you will create all the evidence to prove that. And the other insight that I'd pass on is that when you learn something, it doesn't mean that you have to continue doing it until the day you die. So it's that sense of curiosity. I wonder what it would be like to learn how to do international money transfers in a way that's really simple and easy. Well, you learn how to do it, and then after a while you won't have to do it because you can get someone else to do it for you. This is more of a recent example in our life. So points of view and all of this, getting over your points of view about you can't do something is probably one of the biggest gifts that you can have in your business. And also knowing that it's actually quite easy to learn all these things if you've got a point of view that it's actually quite easy.
Cool. Thank you, Steve. And so I want to thank you guys for being on here. I know I'm going to bring David on a little bit more just to talk about the class that you are doing again and the choice of the payment that we have. In the interim, if you like these podcasts, can you please share it? It's like, write a review, etc. And don't forget to check out accessconsciousness.com and accessjoyofbusiness.com if you want to find a Joy of Business facilitator. Now, Steve and Chutisa and David are actually all Right Riches for You Access Consciousness facilitators. So you can also find them on rightriches.com as well. I think, is that the website, Right Riches?
Yes, that's correct. That's rightrichesforyou.com.
Rightrichesforyou, FORYOU.com. So, David, tell us about your unique choices that you have of the payment for your taster class that is on the 10th of December.
Well, a main thing we're going to talk about in this class is that choice creates, and that people always want to make a right or a wrong choice or the best choice. So we start the class with a pricing system that requires you to choose. The price for the class is your choice. So we give you 3 options and you can choose your own price. And there's no difference. The class will be the same for everyone, irrespective of what price they're choosing. So the most expensive choice we offer is US dollar $350. You pay the $350, you get the class. Second choice is you buy a night at the castle or 3 nights at El Lugar by going on the website projectpossibilities.com. And one of those tickets we are selling is US dollar $300. So instead of paying $350 US dollar, you could also buy a ticket for $300 through Project Possibilities and use that to spend 1 night at our castle or even 3 nights at El Lugar. And then there's a third choice. If you don't like to pay $350 or buy a ticket, you can also just pay $250 USD and you get the same class. So you have choices: $350 US dollars, $250 US dollars, or buy a ticket for $300. You choose your price and you will choose what will create the most in your life and in your future. And I'm really, really curious to find out who is choosing what and how many people choose what. It's just a choice. It's just a choice, and play with the energy choice creates. And look at the prices. The first idea is, of course, I'm going to take the cheapest. Yeah, wait a second and then ask the question, what choice would create the most here? And then choose the price again. So have fun with that game.
I want to add, David, too, because each one of those choices creates a future. And each one of those choices will add to your life and living. And it's like, I mean, this podcast is called The Art and Industry of Business and Living. And each one of those choices will add to it. And yet one of them will create a future that you cannot ignore. One of them will create a future that you cannot work out. You cannot figure it out. What it does is it invites infinite possibilities. So you choose which one. I absolutely love that. So please join us, Access Consciousness. And I think if you just search David Kubes, then you'll find the class. Okay. It's on Noosa, Australia on the 10th of December, which means it's on the 9th in the US. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining me. I mean, these are literally three of my favorite people, and I could talk to them forever, and you will hear them on my podcast again. The Bowmans have been on here. I know I'm trying to capture David to do an art of travel with me one day. So
I will. I make myself available. It was really fun. Thank you.
So awesome. So thank you so much for joining me. And do you guys have anything else you want to add to the listeners out there?
Consider leading and recognizing that's what the world requires now, more leaders choosing what needs to be chosen.
Thank you. Very profound. Absolutely adore you guys.
Thank you, Simone, for giving me the possibility to be on here. And if I can say something at the end is there's nothing such as a failure as long as you choose the minute you find out that a change is required. So don't be afraid to fail. Life will always go on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
See you next time.